Hello, everyone. Welcome. Come on in, find a seat, settle down for the last of the liminal space. So I'll get started. We're actually waiting for Lani Morris because there's a little bit of, technology, right? So a little bit of difficulty at the moment, but let's start. I'm Jacquie Molloy. If you don't know me, I'm responsible for projects and communications here at Meaningful Aging Australia. And I would like to start our session today, as always, with an acknowledgement of country. I'm coming to you today from Wurundjeri country, land of the Kulin Nation. And I would like to, on behalf of Meaningful Aging Australia, acknowledge the spiritual resilience of our First Nations people and pay respect to elders past and present. So welcome for joining. It's interesting that today's topic is all about play, playfulness, and creativity. And honestly, one of the greatest times of need of play and playfulness and creativity is when we're feeling a little bit stressed. And this could be a stressful situation. Here I am just kind of vamping, if you know that term. Vamping my way through an introduction. Pleased to say that Lani Morris has in fact been able to join us, I think. Okay, I had her for a second and now nope, here we go. Here we go. So I'm going to bring Lani up.
I apologize. I'm not sure how I didn't manage that, but anyway, here I am. So are you. Thank you.
So I'm going to get ourselves sorted. We don't have the lovely Marnie with us today, so I'm kind of just doing a few admin-y things here on Zoom while we get started. There we go. I think I've got everything in place now. All the bells and whistles, all the moving parts. I was just saying, Lani, that today is the topic of play and playfulness and creativity. And honestly, sometimes when you need that the most is when you're sort of thinking, oh my God, is everything going all right?
Indeed.
So welcome, Lani. Lani Morris, creator of Map of Meaning and all-round good egg. Lani, what's been happening?
Well, lots of things, but I think in this topic of play and creativity, I've just been really so keen to talk about it. So it's fabulous to actually be here with you all. And how important it is, particularly for older people. And I was thinking about it, and I've been talking about it with quite a lot of friends about why it's so important. And I guess there were some things I wanted to sort of start off with, really, was partly, I guess, it doesn't mean that we don't take things seriously. So what I really want to set up right at the beginning is the sort of paradox, don't you think? For probably all of us, that life is serious and bad things happen and we have all sorts of experiences. And I think what's really important to me is that at the same time as it being serious, we have the freedom that play and creativity bring along. And that's really the sort of space I want to open up today. And I just want to sort of, in this is going to be a huge acknowledgement to my mum, because if there was one thing my mum could do, it's play. Yeah. So there's going to be numbers of stories about the sorts of ways we unintentionally, in the sense of we didn't sit down and say we need to bring play into this, but fundamentally that's what we did through a series of the last 4 or 5 years of her life, when she was in essence bedridden, in care, and perfectly sound in her mind, but just getting older, and she died at 95. So, she was in her first half of her 90s. And so I just thought that was, I really just want to acknowledge her really as the source of a lot of this. And then I've been doing some talking to others and thinking about it as I prepared for this.
I'm so glad you said it, because the whole reason that we have this as a topic for Liminal Space comes out of conversations that we've had. Here's Moz joining.
exactly.
chief play person, was the conversations that we've had where you've told me things about your mother, and that's why we wanted to have this as a topic, because it really was a case of listening to those stories and recognizing the power underneath that, and the gift that it gives us. Of, I always sort of think about, there's when things. I know I've spoken to Rachel about this as well, this grasping energy. And there's a beautiful kind of expression around, how to hold wet soap. The way to hold wet soap, you can't grasp it because it will slip out of your hand. You've got to hold it lightly.
Yeah.
And I think that if we extend that and we want to think about how do we walk through life holding it lightly, then that's where play and playfulness and creativity come in, isn't it? It's not that it's not serious. It's just how can we lighten? How can we lighten our state, our situation, our beliefs, our thinking? Yeah.
Well, that's what gives us choice. But I was interested in maybe people putting into the chat, if you want to, a couple of things about what brought you along. I mean, is it, and if you think of play, what are questions you might have about play and aging? And because it's really nice to be able to actually involve you if you'd like to be involved. And if you don't want to do that, that's just fine. But it would be great to see that in the chat. And I think for me, it's about that when you're losing a lot of sources of power, and we've talked about that before, about vulnerability as we age, then creativity is a huge source of power. And it's really some stories about that I'd like to be able to sort of bring into today. Because one of the things that with Mum was that I would go and visit her and I'd say, well, how are you? And she'd say, oh, I'm great, thank you. And what have you been doing? And I'd start telling her, and then I couldn't really say, what have you been doing? I did. And she said, I've been doing absolutely nothing but sitting here. Because that was all she was able to do, nothing was happening. And after a while, she said, I can't participate in this conversation. So she couldn't contribute, which left her, the whole conversation very one-sided. And so what we tended to do then, I mean, we played games because that was the thing both of us could participate in. So play in that real sense of playing games. We played games, and in the end we ended up with Ludo, because Ludo we could both understand and play. And she also used to be able to say, I hate you, I'm going to kill you, which I think is very satisfying for her. But one of the things that became so interesting were, when she went in, she's always had very thin skin. And when she went in, she said to them, look, I'm a princess. I can feel a pee through 24 mattresses. So from that point on, they always referred to her as the princess. And so what I noticed was, so they'd say, oh, the princess, and I was referred to as the princess's daughter. But what that did was to give her another role, and that she could play with. So one day we were sitting there and she looked out and there was some nurses out there, carers out there picking flowers. And she said, Lani, did I give them permission to pick flowers? And I said, I don't think you did, Mum. I'm not sure. But, and she said, I don't think I did. Oh, dear. I said, what is it? She said, it's going to have to be the beheading. I said,
off with their head.
She said, yes, it is. They can't just go out there and independent action like that. So I said, all right then. So anyway, after a while, they came in. And obviously she'd played this game with them, because they came in and they took one look at her face and said, oh, Mum. And she said, yes. He said, did I see you picking flowers? And they went, oh, Mum. And started holding hands and backing out of the room. And she said, well, I didn't give you permission, did I? They said, no. They said, oh, Mum, it's not going to be the beheading again, is it? And Mum said, I think it will have to be.
Yep.
Then she looked at me and she said, well, do you think really we should? It's a nice day. And I said, look, darling, it's a nice day. And they seem to be quite harmless, nice people. They've obviously been upset by your response. So we left it there. But you can see what happened, that I think the way that people that she was able to to actually play with an archetype, you could say, of the
Yes. Yes.
and I think, whoops, I'll just pick up the chat in a minute. But I think what was so wonderful about it was, and I was talking about it with a friend who also had parents in care for a long time, one with dementia and the other with Parkinson's. And I think that it was that she could play and bring everything she knew about princesses. And then, of course, you've got lots of roles of princesses. Princesses can be arrogant. Princesses can be, generous and sweet. Princesses could do all sorts of things. So it gave her a place to move that wasn't being a little old lady in a bed and unable to move. And she could create.
Sorry. Yeah. I was just going to say, archetypes are so interesting, aren't they? Because they are part of our identity, and we can adopt any archetype because it's all human experience. So we can step in to any archetype in our thinking or our actions to help. I mean, one of the things that we used to do a lot in leadership work, in corporate leadership work, was to create some play around archetypes and to get people to expand their notion of how they show up as a leader and all the different aspects that you can think of to bring in. But it's the same in any kind of role playing. I mean, there are whole games actually set up where you role play, right? I mean, Dungeons and Dragons is the classic example of that. They are actually called role playing games. So this is part of a human experience of play, is that we can put on roles and explore.
And I think, this is one of the chat in the comment in the chat is around acute care, and I haven't experienced that. So I think, and I'll come to that in a minute, but I think that obviously Mum was a person who could do that, and we invented it together. And I'll tell another story later on about another part of that. But I just think that it gave me such an insight as to what we can do with play, and also playing about the situation. At any point you can change who you are through play, because that's what kids do, don't they?
Yeah, exactly.
So when someone's putting on your clothes for you, you can say, well, of course, as a princess, I'm getting dressed, my dresses. And they used to bring her, she hated water. And so they brought her lemonade every day, just for her fluids. And they'd pour out, Madam, your bubbles, they'd say. So they got to play something other than being a carer of an old person. So, and I got to be the princess's daughter, which gave me some roles if I wanted. I assumed that was a junior princess of some kind. We never quite got
princess in training,
in training. But so I think when we think of play, and the chat sort of is pointing out that it's often around play, like activities, cutting things, throwing balls, and obviously Ludo games, those are play. And I think anything that's engaging and takes us away from the box we are fixed in by society and or ourselves. Now, we talked about this, Rachel and I talked about this, Jackie, in the middle one of these conversations on liminal space, the space between our full-powered adulthood and death, really. And I think that we get so boxed, and we get boxed by our heads. And I think it's been so interesting watching the program on the restaurant that makes mistakes. And the thing that was hardest for people was the diagnosis of dementia, because at that point they became, I am a person with dementia. But in fact, they weren't that different from the person yesterday. Diagnosis. So I think anything that supports us in being able to access other parts, other ways of viewing things.
Well, I think too, if you think about traditionally, play when we're kids, and that's the same with animals as well. When they're growing up, play is very instructive, helps us understand where our boundaries are, what is acceptable, how to navigate situations, all of that. But as adults, when you think about the role of play and creativity, it's often as rest. It's
Yes.
taking a break from what's normal, what's usual, what's onerous, and allowing some space where you're allowed to just be. And
where you can be wicked and naughty.
Exactly. You can really relax a lot of the constraints that are on you. And I think one of the interesting things about a human experience is that it is by nature creative. And so even if we don't consider ourselves to be creative people, we are actually creative because we're human. And so the opportunity to rest is within us, is within us to be able to take a flight of fancy.
And to break free. And you see, in one of the conversations I was having with a friend yesterday, and this was, really quite a serious conversation, what we were coming up with was that people, as we age, we are not who we were before. I am not the person I was 20 years ago. I just cannot move that fast. I can't think as fast as I used to, for heaven's sake.
Yeah.
And she was saying that her mum with dementia was not the mother she knew growing up. And so that led us to say, well, who are they then? Because I think what happens is that families box people into things because you want mum to be who she used to be. Partners box people in because, that was the person I've loved all these years. If we don't see them for a while, they could have changed a lot as well.
Yeah.
So I think that it's really important for us to be aware that we don't know who that person is we're going to visit. And I felt that was a really interesting way to observe it, that if I went in, sometimes I'd go and Mum would be sitting there and I'd go, "Hello, Mrs. Morris, and how are we today?" And she'd take one look at me and she'd go, "I'm fine, thank you." And that sort of allowed us to completely break any politeness that might be. And she could go anywhere from there, and so could I.
Yeah. That's so true. Yeah.
And I thought it also opened up the question of what is the basis of our relationship now? And if we're partners in play, that's a very different relationship from as she was the most stable person in my life. She's not now lying in a bed. I mean, she's fairly reliable because she's lying there, but she's not able to be a person that she was.
Yeah.
And I think that question, what's the basis for our relationship there, is it seems, it's a very serious question, but it also allows for creativity. Who could we be for each other now?
Gosh, that's beautiful, Lani. That is really the permission that sits underneath that, permission around identity, which, I know just from conversations that we have with people working in the sector, that one of the hardest dynamics of all is family members who resist the change or the uncovering of true identity in an older relative, that they find it really disconcerting and will do whatever it takes to hold on to mother or father as opposed to this individual. Mother is just one of the roles. It's not the only one.
And I do think, of course, I mean, I wasn't so nice to Mum before she got into care, to be honest, because I wanted her to be how she was, and I didn't have enough energy in my mind to do the changing needed. But I'd love to tell another story. And this one was really interesting because Mum was holding a cup that had ladybirds on it. This one doesn't. It would be good for the story if it did. She said to me, "Do you believe in God?" And I went, "Well, yes, I do, and no, I don't. Depends." But it's a big question. And I said, "What about you?" She said, "No, I don't think I do, really." But I do like this little beetle. And she's perfectly sane.
Yeah.
In fact, this little beetle is looking after me. And I said, I see. So you don't believe in God, but you do believe in the great beetle. She went, well, yes, I do. Actually, I'm the high priestess of the great beetle faith. Well, that gave us another whole world to play with. So we would be playing Ludo, and she'd say, Great Beetle, I want a 6. And every time we'd get a 6.
Yeah.
And she'd say, thank you, Great Beetle. And then every now and then she wouldn't get a 6. And she'd say, I cannot understand what's happened to the Great Beetle. And then she looked at me, she said, I know, he's having lunch. And I said, and so the problem of evil is solved. God is basically occupied with something else, which is why things are happening. I mean, it was incredibly funny. Then every now and then she'd forget the whole thing, and she'd say, why am I talking to the great people? I'd explain
when did this start?
But the bit I really wanted to tell, and there were wonderful things, I'd bring in little ladybird covered chocolates and say, here, eat of my body, speak of, drink of my blood. And she would eat it thoughtfully. But the most powerful thing, and this was the bit that I think so significant, was that my ex-partner came to visit her, and he loved her very much, and he respected her a lot. And he was a very serious journalist. And he asked her some questions. Now, she read the newspaper every day because he bought it for her, but she didn't retain a lot of it by this point because there wasn't much conversation in her head about it, and no one else was talking about what was going on. So he asked her some questions, and she looked confused, and then she looked at me, and I answered. And he got, after the second time this happened, he registered that she couldn't do it anymore. But what he did, and this was a moment of genius on his part, he looked at her and he said, well, of course, Eileen, why I've really come is I want to know what the great beetle thinks about it. And at that point, she was able to access her entire memory, her rich personality, everything. And she said, well, the great beetle, off she went,
yeah,
and made it all up.
Oh.
And I mean, I could cry.
Yeah.
It's sort of it's only in the context of remembering all of this for this conversation that I realized and just saw again the magnificence of what he did, which was he shifted, so that she could be access the best of her that was still available, and play. And he didn't require her to be given. And in fact, it was a perfectly intelligent, very thoughtful answer.
I'm sure it was actually. Because now that's right. I mean, all the tests to pass have been removed. Like there's no right or wrong now.
Exactly.
There's no shame of knowing or not knowing. Yeah.
She's free to play.
Yeah.
And I understand this is quite a different sort of play from the physical play that some of you are talking about. And I think there are lovely ones, that we can bring in, and that you would, as people working in the sector and activities officers, could know. But I just felt that this one and the freedom of this opens up something else, and opens up something else for families and carers. And I think also we can get so sort of serious that play becomes difficult. And for me, it's the greatest gift, because who might they like to be? Who might mum could have been a pirate. I could have brought in a different hat each time, and we could have played that. I never did it sort of deliberately because I hadn't registered how significant it would be.
Yeah, I mean, the point that you I'm just having a look at the chat here too. I guess that's one of the things to recognize, that play play is an activity. Playfulness doesn't have to be.
Yes.
And so there are two avenues that this can take. And I think that kind of creates the scope, doesn't it? That means that everything is available, because of course there is no one size fits all in terms of what feels good to a person, because it will depend. Some people are more tightly wound because of external forces in their life. And some people may have shame around being playful, and so they need a lot of kind of careful space to know that it's safe.
Yes, and permission. And obviously, Mum and I had a relationship where play was absolutely safe and allowed.
Yes.
And I think it's a really good point you bring up. And I have met people who, can't play and can't be loud. But I'm thinking you can combine them, because if you put, if you made, let's say we made hats, then the hats people wore, they could play with if they were capable of that.
Yeah.
And if that's suited. But it also means that it means, I guess, that we as people working with older people need to have play accessible in ourselves as well, and know how to make that safe.
That's right. I mean, this is part of spiritual care, recognizing distress, spiritual distress. And if someone can't access play in some capacity, then that is, I think, a manifestation of spiritual distress. Again, because we are creative by nature. And so helping someone to feel safe around lightness, I think, is beautiful work to do. I'm just going to read out. Colin has suggested a resource. It's a book. So everyone can see this in the chat, by the way. Anne Basting, and it's called Creative Care: A Revolutionary Approach to Dementia and Elder Care. Yeah, I think dementia and play and playfulness go together very well, because you have a lot of access to kind of sensory input that can be helpful in allowing people to kind of, I want to say riff off of something, but it's that kind of, that it can remind them, it can take them into a space. I'm just going to go through these questions. There's a box called Lifestyle Activities Leader, and then spiritual, and then spiritual care practitioner. Any thoughts on how to justify the, what's that little thing getting in the way? Justify the being with people, playing games, join in mindful colouring as being valid spiritual care interventions, an opportunity for spiritual care discussion. Yeah, I think, just like we were just saying, that I think for people who perhaps come across as that. Now, I'm not an expert here. I should say that. I should make the disclaimer, not an expert. So this is kind of just thinking, and it would be good to get other people's thoughts. And maybe this is something we could do in a community of practice as well, for our members to have these discussions in a deeper way as well. But I think anything that promotes a peace of mind, optimism, a sense of I matter, and I'm entitled to have good days. I think anything that kind of serves that purpose, no matter what the activity or conversation is, I think is part of spiritual care. I think it's part of allowing people to fully be in themselves and explore. We know that, if you were to ask people randomly at any age, actually, what's your purpose in life? That's a very difficult question. Even what's important to you, without any kind of guidance or facilitation, these are difficult questions to just answer. Like, oh yeah, I've got the answer to that off the top of my head. Our whole lives, we sort of are trying to wrestle with this and understand this and work it out for ourselves. So it's really no wonder that to deliver spiritual care, we need to know what's important to someone, what they value highly in terms of what makes them feel most like them, to them. But people also need to be able to explore, to discover that for themselves, because they might not know. And so I think all of these types of activities that are undertaken, certainly in residential aged care, are all part of spiritual care in a way, because games help us know, play helps us know us, I think. Yeah. That's what I think. But I love games. I come from a big game playing family, and yeah, love them. I love them for the escape.
And I also think that in terms of spirituality, I think humor is one of the great spiritual gifts, isn't it? Is to be able to laugh at oneself, to see oneself both as significant and insignificant, is the great freedom. You know, take ourselves seriously. What is our purpose? But in the end, it really doesn't matter. You know, we're just another speck in the universe. And there's something about the freedom of that, and the freedom to be joyful. I think there's joy in play, and I think joy is one of the great spiritual gifts. And to allow people to be joyful in the moment, joyful in the freedom of themselves, feels to me a significant spiritual release and a significant spiritual experience.
Oh, yeah. You know, when we think about how we know kids are playing, either they're like tunnel focused, they're so immersed in something that tends to be they're in a play zone of some kind, but also giggles. You know, they're playing when they're giggling. When they find everything funny because they've put themselves where their perspective is suddenly different for whatever reason, and they giggle. And so I totally agree. I think laughing is play as well.
And it's one of the things we find, you know, with the map of meaning, which is the workshop that I'll be doing next week on transitions using the map of meaning.
Yeah.
But, you know, as you said, meaning and purpose are such serious topics. And I've had situations where, you know, say, well, we want to talk about meaning, and people go, oh, for heaven's sake, I do not want to go there. And you go, right, fine, yes, well, but they, you know, and it's like you, again, they box you into you're going to be deeply serious and it's all going to be about meaning. But actually, the structure for understanding meaning gives you a freedom to play because you're not worrying about it anymore. You know, you can return to that structure and find security anytime you want to and find answers. And that gives you the space to go, okay, I can play. And I am much more playful and lighthearted since I worked with the map. I mean, it's really interesting when I look back. I've always had an ability to play, but I'm a lot less serious than I used to be, which is good for everybody.
I think too, because some of the questions.
I'm just thinking about time. Sorry, Jackie.
Oh, I know. We've gone over, but like
I just am mindful of it. I was trained as a broadcaster and I can speak to the second. So I just am wondering where we are in that.
We've got a very relaxed
and if there are any other
on.
any questions anybody has or any comments.
Just while you're saying that, I'll just if you're thinking about a question, please do put your hand up or just come off mute. But the map of meaning, one of the reasons why I love it so much and why I think you're right about it, it kind of invites play because it invites curiosity because there's no right or wrong answer. There's no, and the questions themselves feel friendly, I think is the word I want to use. They don't feel like I should know the answer to this. And if I don't, I'm doing it all wrong. It's they feel more friendly than that. And that's why I think one of the reasons why it's so popular. I'll also just say, as Lani mentioned, the transitions workshop. Oh, this is when I miss Marnie. I'm going to find I'm going to put a link in the chat for the transitions workshop with Lani that's coming up next Thursday the 21st of September at, I didn't notice, 3 o'clock, is it, I think? No, 1 o'clock. Australian Eastern Standard Time. There is the link in the chat for all the information that you need to understand what the workshop will address and how to register. And spend some time with Lani, which, as you all will appreciate, is time well spent. You know that because you keep turning up to Liminal Space. And I can't believe it's the last one.
I know. I think we should do more. I'm fine.
I think we should do more. Yeah, I agree.
People are or not.
Talk about this.
I just find it so fascinating to have topics like this. And
Yeah.
And it's one of the joys for me of aging. No one ever told me it was going to be this interesting.
Yeah, right. It's true though, isn't it? Like you do get wiser as you get older, and wisdom doesn't need to be serious either. I can see that Rachel's come off mute. Do you want to say something over there?
Me breathing, going, I'm so excited. Thank you so much, Jack, and to Lani. I just have loved this. I've stayed in the background literally because I've loved this conversation so deeply that I just couldn't miss it. I'm working away as I'm going, but it's just delighting me. And I know that others will feel the same way. So I just want to say thank you so much, Jacquie, and thank you so much, Lani. And I think this is starting really important conversations. So please come along to the workshop if you possibly can, because I think, you know, one of the things that we really want to do is build this network. And if you come along to the workshop as well, we'll connect you up to a Facebook group. And I think, you know, we'll have a lot more that we can do together and expand this, because I'm pretty sure that the people on this webinar today are very good people, and you know, good people in the world, we need to kind of multiply our efforts. So that's enough from me. Thank you so much, Jack and Lani.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming along.
Yeah.
It's terribly disheartening if people don't come along. We've got exciting things to say.
Oh, I know. Well, we have something like, we've got over 220 registered for this series who are getting the recording because they can't be here live. We're getting lots of lovely feedback from it. So, you know, it's just been a joy. So we'll just keep doing something, right? We'll work it out.
Have to.
We'll work it out.
I'd love to, if there's a chance to hear from people, you know, feedback, questions, areas of interest and concern, because it's the beginning of a journey for me. And living in a retirement village, I get to experience it all the time. You know, I'm in it. We have a dementia ward, we have a hospital. I see my friends hitting challenges, getting older, bits of them dropping off like they are from me. And it's a journey that I find extraordinarily interesting. And I would be really interested to, you know, hear from and have conversations with people who are working in the field and who are also thinking about it. It's just such a rich area.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Oh, well, Mozzie's here to say goodbye as well. That's good.
Thank you, everybody.
Go well, everyone, and we'll see you next time. Bye now.